"Run!" I shouted as I started loading the rocket launcher. She wasn't listening. Her AB-10 was rattling off hundreds of shots that harmlessly bounced off the Hellion. Our only chance was the rocket launcher. I fired off the first 2 rockets as I was dancing backward. The force knocked me into Arlene and sent us both sprawling. The AB-10 skidded across the floor, and Arlene went after it on hands and knees. An energy bolt flashed between us, searing my eyeballs for a moment. I didn't care if I could see, so long as I could feel the smooth, metal surfaces of the little D-cell rockets and finish reloading. Just as I finished loading, my vision cleared. The 8-foot hellprints bore down upon us, surrounded by smoke and stinking of brimstone. I'd promised myself never, ever, to fire off rockets this close to the target. But a good look at that green Gorgon face with the ram's horns was all I needed to reassess my position. I squeezed. The 3rd and 4th direct hits slowed the behemoth to a confused crawl, but still it stood. I could see again, but now I couldn't hear. Loading, fingers numb, I didn't bother getting back to my feet. I fired from where I lay. As I slid past Arlene, who had picked up her machine pistol and was aiming it, she shielded her eyes and hugged the ground as rockets 5 and 6 pounded the same tough chest that had withstood the previous 4. I closed my eyes while sliding. The force of the sound took me like a physical wave, carrying me down the hall. The weight of Mars pressed on my eardrums as I rose groggily to my feet to reload the launcher. The Prince of Hell stood stock still, eyeing me with a doleful expression. I aimed and prepared to fire, but the monster made a loud, wheezing sound, a sigh, and tumbled over, stiff as a statue to impact directly on its face.
"What in God's name was that?"
Arlene gasped, still shaking. "No naming game for this baby," I said. "Already has a name. You're looking at the same model of hellprint you dodged when you slipped through the crack on Phobos, before the gate. This is what was tramping down the corridor while you scrawled a skull and sea bones on the wall." She shook her head, clearing alien cobwebs and appearing truly weary for the first time.
"Boy, if the light had been better, you'd have been on your own, Fly. 'Cause I sure as hell wouldn't have wasted 2 seconds making a mark with that mother staring me in the face."
"Oh yes, you would have.
Egomaniac."
We needed all the cheering we could give each other. Picking through the carcasses, it seemed unfair that our only reward would be more ooze, exactly where we needed to go.
"Damn," said Arlene. "The whole place looks flooded."
"You came up with the jogging theory," I reminded her. "Let's find out how good it is." I shouldn't have said anything, for then she insisted on going first, running through the middle of the toxin. I followed close behind, feeling the pain right through my soles. We didn't quite manage to jog, but we did keep up a brisk walk. The toxin slowed us down with a sucking, gripping quality. Each second made me feel like it had been too long since my last checkup. I kept wishing for another of those crazy blue spheres to show up. I was beginning to wonder if I'd imagined the first. All bad things come to an end. We finally made it around the facility to the other elevator in Sector 9. Not 10 feet from where we'd started. If only we'd been able to shove through the flesh ivy. I was beginning to hate the ooze more than I did the monsters, except when it was in barrels. The lift was the antique kind, with a lever to start and stop rather than buttons. We had a hell of a time trying to get it to stop at the next level down. The level started with a teleporter. Not a good sign, far as I was concerned. "My turn to go first," I said. Arlene didn't argue. By the time she arrived, 30 seconds later, I was back at work. I'd killed 3 imps, and 5 former soldiers and workers, a more dim-witted than usual zombie collection.
"My turn to rescue you,"
she said. But this was duck soup after the Hell Prince. Heck, most of the zombies weren't even armed. We're getting good at this, I said.
Don't get cocky,
she warned. I let it pass without remark. A platform lowered as we approached, as if inviting us into the parlor. Still feeling cocky despite Arlene's warning, I stepped aboard. Arlene followed, of course. At the top, I took a turn and came face to face with another Hell Prince, holding a blue keycard in its claws.
Get it! Get it!
Arlene shouted. I didn't know whether she meant the card or the monster, but in either case, I had only 4 rockets left. Not enough. I jerked up the launcher, then paused, staring. Something was weird. Then I realized we were nose to snout, and the thing hadn't screamed yet, or moved. I edged closer. It was frozen solid, like it had seen a Gorgon from Greek mythology, turned to stone. Heart pounding like a pile driver, I stepped close and gently plucked the blue keycard from its claw. Then I rejoined Arlene on the floor, still shaking. Toxic waste literally surrounded us, the dry space where we stood like an island. The light was good enough to see other raised machinery platforms, making islands in this sea. Arlene found a pole of thin metal. She tapped around for shallow parts and traced a crossable path to the first island. Then she repeated the process until we made it through the toxic goop and into a blue glowing corridor. At least the color of the corridor made me glad to have the blue keycard. On cue, we ran into a blue trimmed door at the end of the corridor. We crossed into a narrow corridor with red, glowing walls, floor, and ceiling, so bright that it hurt our eyes. We heard a familiar thud-thud at the end of the hall. It sounded like more flesh blocks. Variety is the spice of life, even on Deimos. The sounds came from a piece of stamping machinery that didn't seem to be the least bit organic. I was grateful for that.
Oh, great,
said Arlene.
Some jerk has tossed another keycard onto the base.
The implication was that we couldn't walk away from something so valuable as another computer keycard. A giant metal piston repeatedly smashed down to within a few centimeters of the base, stamping anything onto the base into powder. Arlene, why would anyone put the card out for us, except as bait? We don't need it.
We used the blue keycard to get this far, she insisted. What's behind the mystery yellow door?
But Arlene, she was through listening. The only way to get the yellow keycard was to slide across the base, grab it, and roll off the other side before the stamping part came down to turn the contestant into pate. She backed away, measuring the piston's rise and fall with her eyes. I was about to stop her and tell her about the patented fly technique for opening doors. Then I remembered my meager supply of rockets. At least let me do that, I said.
You? Corporal 2 left feet on the drill field?
I opened my mouth to angrily protest. Then I realized she was right. Understating it, if anything. I never could get the timing right on anything more complicated than dress right dress or point and shoot. My heart in my mouth, I watched Arlene count, timing the piston. Then quickly, before she could think better of it or I could object again, she jumped just as it hit the low point and started to rise again. Arlene sprinted across the room and threw herself into a face-first baseball slide, scooping the keycard in her arms. She slid to a halt, but she was still on the base. For an instant she froze. I couldn't possibly reach her in time, and a horrible image flashed through my mind. If Arlene died in the next cycle, I knew I would jump on the machine and die alongside her. Thank God I didn't have to make that decision. At the last second, she made a panic roll off the platform. Arlene left the keycard on the stamper, near the edge, but it was a simple matter. When the piston rose, just to scoop it off from where she stood, she pocketed it, And good thing. Past the stamping machine was a thick, airlock door, tough as a bank vault, surrounded by yellow lights. I doubt a rocket would have scratched the chrome. Maybe a SAM. The yellow keycard led us into a central, circular corridor surrounding a giant, cylindrical room. We took a lift down into the room. Once inside, the lift moved up again.
Fly? I don't see any switch to bring it back down.
Damned if she wasn't right. From inside, the lift door looked like a spine with ribs coming out of it. Once again, no human would have ever made anything like this. The aliens were definitely reworking Deimos, and had been for some time.
I don't like their interior decorator,
she said, as if reading my mind. She tilted her head in the direction of the latest attraction. A row of what looked like red spittoons stretched out of sight, and on each one there was a skull bathed in red light. If these were human minds, I'd say they were psychotic, I commented.
You know something, Fly? Every monster we've seen has a head too large or strangely shaped to be mistaken for a human head.
Yes?
Then how do you account for the skulls? Whether they're designs on walls, or ceilings, or whole skulls like these. They're all human. And they couldn't have been taken from us. Not all of them. With all the zombies and unbeheaded corpses, who'd be left?
She touched one.
This isn't real,
she said.
More like metal than bone.
I turned it over, looking at it from different angles. I'll bet it's meant to scare us, same as the freaking swastika. Well, we're past being bothered by Halloween. I instantly regretted my choice of words. No sooner would I toss a challenge into the air than it would be answered. Was someone watching our every move? This time it was a horde of imps, zombies, and a couple of pumpkins coming around the curve of the room, screaming doom in our ears. Fortunately, they were only coming at us from the one direction. We would have had no chance if attacked from both directions. Arlene dropped flat, and I let fly with my last rockets. I ignored the imps, concentrating on the two pumpkins, the greater threat. Somebody got careless on the other side, and soon all the monsters were mixing it up among themselves. We drew back around the curve and waited for silence. Then we slid back and smoked the survivors with shotgun and AB-10. I still had one last rocket. In the course of the fight, somebody, us or them, accidentally activated a switch in the floor that caused part of a staircase to rise. When the last pumpkin smashed into orange and blue slime against the ruined head of the last assassinated imp, we started up the steps. Arlene activated the next switch. Another set of steps rose, and we took them to the third switch and set of stairs. At the top we found a teleporter. We stepped aboard one at a time. Me first, teleporting to a long corridor with barred windows looking outside. Arlene bent over for a closer view and pulled back with a gasp. "Let me guess," I said. "You didn't see the stars or Mars." Swallowing hard, she motioned for me to look for myself. She wasn't in the mood for humor. Blood had drained from her face, a reaction I'd never before seen in Arlene. I put my face against the window. As a child, I'd seen a painting in a museum that gave me my first nightmare. I hadn't thought of it in years, but now it came back to me. Beyond the window was a river of human faces, hundreds of them, each an island in an ocean of flesh. Each face had a horrified expression stamped on it, each a damned soul. The spectacle achieved its purpose. We were both distracted. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been so careless as to allow a stomping, single-minded demon to get close enough to clamp its jaws on Arlene's back and shoulder. Her cries were echoed by each face in the river of damned souls, each screaming Arlene's pain and torment.